started. Lots to cover today. We got 45 minutes, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions and whatnot. But I'm Jackie Angela with J. Duarte Consulting. It's an acronym, so it's for my name, Jackie, Development, Architecture, Real Estate, Technology, and Engineering. I do marketing consulting specifically for this industry, and I'll tell you a little bit about my background in a minute. But I'm going to start out with an icebreaker, because we're going to talk a lot about differentiators today. Marketing is all about what differentiates your company and what you have to offer, and how do you communicate that to your target market. So since we're talking a little bit about differentiators, John Savanto, I can't take credit for this, he's not in here, but he has a great sort of icebreaker that I wanted to present to you all. And it's if you could tell me one thing about either you or your company or your services, take it however you want to, that differentiates you and is unique that I could not find on Google, what would you tell me?
My life goal is to be an oligarch.
Is it? Nice, okay. Cool, that's awesome. Anyone else? I'll take three, I'll start picking, but what makes you unique? Megan?
Alright, so I guess with our firm, what I would say, what makes us unique is we're,
but I can't find it on Google, remember.
But you can't find it on Google.
Yeah, can't find it on your website. It's either you, your company, just can't find it on Google. What's that unique thing that differentiates?
We operate with the soul of a small company, but with the power of national force to get stuff done. And from like a personal side of it, and I personally would be the one to help you execute, make that happen.
Okay, awesome. I know, I was thinking that. That's great. Yeah, that's a differentiator. Anyone else?
Mom made four girls under the age of 5 at the house, and so that kind of gets.
Sympathy votes.
Hopefully you can't Google that.
Yeah. And you never know these days, but cool. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for kind of playing along with that. But today, just to give you an overview, what I'm going to talk about is sort of, obviously we have a bunch of different size companies and different type of companies all within this space. Some of you have marketing departments of 0, your party of 1, and then others of you probably have marketing departments of 20 plus, or large national marketing departments. So obviously your marketing approach is going to be different depending on what type of company you are, or what size company you are. But today we're going to go over basically if you have 0 marketing strategy, kind of starting from the bottom, what are the 5 or 6 things that you should sort of evaluate when you're looking at your yearly marketing strategy? What should you be paying attention to, and what are some general best practices that you can take away today and go back to either yourself or your national marketing department and say, hey, have we looked at these things? And if we haven't, like, let's take a look and see what we do with it. I'm going to shut the door because I think we got all of our people. But a little bit of background about myself. I have a degree in marketing and a minor in selling and sales management. And I've been in the AEC industry for about 8 years now. So started out at a small MVP firm out of Orlando on the public side. So became very familiar with SF330s in that world. And then moved to Jordan Scala Engineers as their in-house marketing manager, managing their national program out of Atlanta for 3 years. And that was on the service side, obviously, engineering. Then moved to Oxblue Construction Cameras as their director of marketing for about a year. So then saw same target market, but on the product side. So kind of got to see marketing from both standpoints, which I feel like they're both very unique sectors, but dealing with the same target market. So that was interesting for me. And then went to a telecom company as their international director of marketing. Meanwhile, I've been working with Matt Marvel and the Built organization since its inception in 2015 on the side doing freelance. So I work with Built National, Georgia Built, Carolina Built, North Texas and Colorado Built, all the Built chapters. So I've been very fortunate to have been in this industry a while and seen different sides of it. So hopefully you guys can take some of these best practices and whatnot and get something out of it today. But I do want to say, just during this presentation, want questions, right? Like I want to know what's important to you, because I could sit up here and talk for 45 minutes about what I think you should take away from it. But at the same time, you might have things that you want to concentrate on or questions that you have. So please, if you have something you want to talk about or you want to spend more time on one topic, raise your hand and we can jump around. This doesn't have to be a formal sort of presentation. I prefer it actually not to be. So with that being said, first thing I just kind of want to go over is what are the general goals of marketing? Like why do you actually do marketing? And first kind of wanted to touch on the difference between business development and marketing. I think in this industry, they tend to get lumped together, which makes complete sense because they need to support one another. But I kind of wanted to see what your perception about business development versus marketing is and how you view it, and just sort of, can anyone sort of comment on what you think the difference between the two is?
Well, business development is going out and being in front of the customers and giving the presentations. With the marketing, I know we lump sales and marketing together, but I mean, we're a startup company, basically, been in business 3 years. The overall goal is not to have one person in charge of sales and marketing. They should be working together, not on the same level, same playing field, but there should be a leader over marketing and a leader over sales.
Yeah, completely agree. When you can't have that, I think that's ideal. The way that I like to communicate it is business development or your traditional sales is a one-to-one conversation. It's me talking to you about what the company has to offer, or what value, what benefit I can bring to you. Whereas marketing is crafting that same message, but on a one-to-many scale. So it's sort of the same message, the same goal of communicating what differentiates you and how you can bring value, but it's the one-to-one versus one-to-many. So we're going to touch on a lot of digital marketing techniques and things that you can do, again, from that one-to-many standpoint. But again, like you said, those departments absolutely have to work in sync with one another, and they support each other, because at the end of the day, the main goal of marketing is to drive revenue and drive leads. Things can look pretty and they can look beautiful and whatnot. A lot of times people think of marketing and they think of a logo, or they think of a pretty website. But at the end of the day, if what you're producing in terms of marketing is not actually generating leads or generating revenue in some shape or form, then your marketing is ineffective. So working closely with your sales team to understand what are your goals for this year. If you're an engineering firm and you're trying to push your sustainability services, the marketing team needs to know that, because if they're out there pushing just your general, oh, we offer this, but they're not focusing on what the sales team is focusing on, or the business development team, there has to be that alignment so we can make sure that marketing is being effective. John?
Do you provide marketing audits to find out how well our teams are functioning?
Yes, that's actually I would say my specialty is coming in and basically looking at a department, and that's kind of what we're going to go through today, is looking at what your company is doing, what you have to offer, what you're currently doing in terms of marketing, what your strategy looks like, and finding out what works, what doesn't work, and if it's not working, why is it not working, and how we can make it better. So that's like one of the services I offer and come in and do frequently, but there's a wide breadth of things. But yeah, so today we're kind of, again, going in as if you have zero strategy, starting from the base, what are your takeaways? But again, I want to go over goals of marketing because I think it's important to know not only what to do, but why you're actually doing it is the biggest thing. So to drive revenue and generate leads, which we talked about, but also to build awareness. Obviously, you want people to know who your company is and become comfortable with your brand. So over time, when they start seeing your name or start seeing your logo in different places, it's a familiarity and it starts to build that trust. So awareness is part of this as well. Establishing tonality and brand perception. And what this means is, does your visual identity, your logo, your fonts, your colors, does it communicate what you're trying to differentiate yourself as? And what I mean by that is there's a lot of psychology actually that goes behind like, what do certain fonts communicate? So you see I use a very thin font in my logo. What is that visually communicating to you? What do you see and what do you think when you actually see that logo and see even those colors? Or if you talk about tonality, I'm talking about copy, which is any written text. So if I'm reading something and it's on your website and it's a headline, what does that tone of voice? Is it passive voice? Is it active voice? What does that communicate to me, and what does that tell me about your brand and therefore your company? Marketing is really interesting because there's a lot of science, especially now with digital marketing. There's a lot of data and science and reports that actually tells you what's effective and what's not effective. But then there's also sort of the softer art element of it, if you will, that is psychology driven. Again, what colors communicate what, etc. But sort of fusing that art side and that science side is why I geek out personally on marketing, why I think it's really interesting, because you have to have both elements for it to be successful. But going off on a tangent, but becoming a thought leader. So again, for those of you that were in the LinkedIn session, what content you're sharing on your company profile, what content you're putting out there. You want to be seen as a thought leader within the industry. This builds, again, credibility and that people know that you know what you're talking about. So if I'm a marketing firm, I'm going to want to post content that is actually valuable and meaningful to my target audience, so people that need marketing. So I'm going to not just tell you why I'm great, no one wants to hear you talk about yourself. but provide valuable sort of blogs or articles or just things that are of value to you, so you start to build that trust and credibility with me and start to understand that I'm not just good at, I say whatever company, you're not just good at what you do, but you can actually kind of prove it through this thought leadership piece. So, and we'll go into this all a little bit more in depth, but then producing an easier sell, if you will, at the end of the day goes back to driving revenue. So everything is here to basically sort of build upon each other and make it so it's a no-brainer that they should hire you or use your services for whatever they're looking for. So with that being said, so sort of an overview of the 6 things. Again, there are many different ways that we could slice and dice this, but when I go into a marketing or any company and sort of look at marketing efforts, I think it's really important to first of all sort of consider these 6 things as a baseline. We could go off on hours worth of presentations for each of these bullet points, and there's so many different avenues you can do with marketing, but as an overall kind of quick bullet list of what I think is really important to take a look at, and we'll dive into each of these, is branding. So that's both from a written standpoint and in terms of what your actual written content on your website and marketing collateral, and then the more obvious, which is your visual branding. So we'll talk about that. Is it actually communicating what differentiates you and what you want it to? And then setting up guidelines, I think, is incredibly important too, because as you all know, generally the marketing person is not the only person using the materials that are being sent out, whether it be a brochure, whether it be putting a logo on something. So creating some sort of guideline or baseline for consistency is very important, and I find that that's particularly true in this industry because there's generally project managers and different people who are pulling these pieces of content and distributing them, or putting a logo on something. So just creating sort of a baseline for consistency I find very important. Consistency in branding, whether people realize it or not, is a perceived consistency in what you offer, what your company offers in your product and service. So if I have an old logo on one qualifications package that I'm sending out, and then I send the same architect another qualifications package with a different template or a different logo, people, there's just, even if it's not obvious, it's a subconscious bias of, okay, well, if they can't get their marketing materials consistent and in line, then what does that tell me about them as a company and them as like what their service and what their actual product offering is. So creating guidelines is important in my opinion. Website design and optimization, so there's actually a ton of science in what goes, and statistics and data and behind what goes behind a well-designed website. But more importantly, I think a lot of times people build a website because they think they have to build a website. But is your website actually serving the purpose that it's meant to serve? And for most people, for a lot of people, that would be in some way or form to drive leads, right? And it could be a soft way. It could be that you just want to have a box to enter your email address. So if people are interested, they have a way to contact you. Maybe it's just a phone number, but there has to be some sort of purpose behind your website. If you're a firm of one and you want to start ranking in Google, which is SEO, which we'll talk about in a minute, it could be an awareness standpoint, right? Like you're trying to rank, so when people search for whatever service you have to offer, you start ranking on your website. So taking a look and really thinking about and being strategic about, is your website serving the purpose that it should? It is big, because a lot of people just put up a website because, again, they think they have to. And from a design standpoint, there's actually a lot you can do in terms of colors and what we call call to actions, which are basically buttons that take you to a certain place. There's a lot of best practices and small things you can do to optimize that as well, which we'll go a little bit more into. Search engine optimization is how you rank in Google. So if someone types in anything engineering, you want to be the first one that ranks, ideally, right? Like that would be great. You're the first search result in Google. You want to be on the first page on Google's search anyway, because statistically, I don't remember exactly what the percentage is, but it's close to like 80 to 90% don't go past the first page on Google. So if you whatever search results are on that 20-page first page, you want to make sure you're on there, because if people go to search for you, they're likely not going to see you if you're past that. So there are a bunch of small things you can do to just boost your SEO and start to do that even just internally. I mean, SEO, there are experts out there and people where that's their entire job and that's what they do day in and day out. So you can get super granular with it, but there's really, really simple things you can do with your current website, whatever you have up now, to just start to make that a little bit better. And SEO takes a while to actually improve and generate, like even once you make the change, just for Google to archive it and start to pick it up, it takes a while. So you can go back and do it now and start to see improvements hopefully soon. Marketing automation tools and automated workflows. This is a little more advanced, so depending on how many questions or what you guys want to focus on, we might not necessarily need to spend a lot of time on that today, but there are a lot of great tools out there like HubSpot, Marketo, Pardot that basically can plug into the back end of your website, and they have a lot of different functions that they serve. So they can do your email campaigns. One of the big things that I think is valuable is it plugs into your CRM and it can track user activity. So using cookie tracking, it basically drops something. I mean, all websites have cookie tracking, but it allows you to see what your website visitors are viewing on your website. So if they're viewing, let's say, a specific project profile, you can set it up so you can actually get a notification when they view that project profile, and so you know to reach out a week later, or, a couple weeks later, a day later, depending on what you want your cadence to be. But there are a lot of different automated workflows that you can actually set up to make your marketing more intelligent and more efficient. But we'll talk a little bit about that later. And the last one is paid search and sort of search engine marketing, which is in relation to paid search. But if you have a specific goal that you're trying to reach, so I'll go back to the engineering example, if you're trying to push sustainability services and you don't already have that organic sort of SEO working for you, then it makes sense to go ahead and create specific campaigns for that sustainability services so that when people type in sustainability, they're not going to see your page yet because you don't have that SEO juice, if you will, going for you yet. So if you put in, if you do a Google AdWord campaign or some sort of paid campaign, you can actually start to drive leads back to your website for that specific term until you get that organic search. Sean?
So you mentioned HubSpot and then the CRM. Is there a CRM that you say, if I as a company don't have a good setup, that you say it's kind of a no-brainer that you should go this route?
I don't, because I think that it's unique for each company. I don't mind Deltek Vision. I know that a lot of people within the industry use Deltek Vision. I actually have found that if it's set up right, it can be super powerful. I like Microsoft Dynamics a lot, but I feel like it's not. I actually really do. I really do. Yeah, I've set it up twice. I've set it up for 2 companies, like from scratch, like working with developers, took like a year to roll out. And I really, really like it, honestly. I don't love HubSpot CRM. I think it's great.
It's free though, you get what you pay for.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I mean, a lot of companies, they start out with the free version and then they just kind of keep it going afterward. And it's nice because you don't have to do any sort of, like you don't have to do an API. You don't have to do any like coding to make the 2 programs talk, right? You don't even have to use like a third party like a Zapier or whatever. It's connected.
Right.
But I don't know, I personally do not like HubSpot CRM, but I like Dynamics a lot.
We had an issue with, the last company I worked for a decade, Public Trade. We went to the Microsoft Dynamics and it was horrible. It was a horrible transition. I don't know if they put it together the right way, maybe, but I'd have to go buy Microsoft Dynamics for dummies and give it to everyone because it was just so freaking, it was so convoluted. Like just to add in a lead was just ridiculous.
Well, so I think what I was gonna say was that I don't think it's what CRM system you're using, I think it's how you set it up. It's actually taking a look at what you need, eliminating the fields that you don't need. So out of the box, there's a bunch of shit you don't need. Like you can get rid of a lot of it, right? And there's a bunch of stuff that you probably don't have that you should be adding in. That especially this industry, I feel like is very unique, and there are a lot of things that typical CRMs don't have built in automatically, which I think is why a lot of people tend to use Deltek Vision. But when it's set up right, I mean, I had a great experience with.
Did you work with Salesforce at all?
Have I worked with it?
Yeah, Salesforce.
Very, very shortly when I was.
Well, I was wondering.
You have an opinion on 360?
What about it?
You have an opinion on that software, that CRM?
Microsoft
Yeah.
Dynamics?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's one of your favorites.
Yeah,
Cool,
that's one of my
man.
favorites.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
And there was a company, I don't know if they're around anymore, but a couple of years ago called, are you talking about AEC 360? Is that what you're talking about?
I don't know the full name, I just know
Okay.
we use call 360.
Okay, got it. Okay. I think so. Microsoft Dynamics, there was a company that kind of built an overlay that was AEC specific, but it was still Microsoft Dynamics base.
Yeah.
But I had not a great experience. The software was great. The software itself was great. But anyway,
Cool.
just gotta customize it. But yeah. But CRM can plug in, is what I was saying with that. You can pick and choose what fields you want to pull in to get really targeted and really specific about your marketing campaigns. so now we'll go into branding. And again, we don't have to follow this format. So if you guys have other questions or other things you want to hop around, let me know. I'm all for that. I could nerd out about marketing for a long time. But we talked about this a little bit. So branding in itself, the whole intention of branding is that if people were to look at your business card or look at your website or brochure or piece of collateral, what should they take away from it? What is their perception of your brand? And a great example that I like to try and use is that if you have a one-person firm, you can still have marketing that looks like you're a 40-person firm or a 200-person firm. It was interesting because I worked, the telecom company that I was talking to you guys about, they're a small firm. They're like a 50-person firm across 3 offices. For telecom, that's small, not for, you know, all industries. But for that particular industry, they were seen as a small player. But when we did their website redesign, it was incredible the response that we got because we built it out very intentionally to be well designed and to basically, we were communicating that we can handle a lot of work. Like, people don't need to know that we're a small firm by manpower because we have the ability to, our differentiator was that we had, the ability to serve a lot of different countries in terms of the market. But, so we built out this website that visually looked like you would never guess that it was a 50-person firm. Whereas I've seen larger firms that don't necessarily put the resources or research or time into actually building out their website, and they may be a huge firm, but based on their website, you go there and you see it and you're like, oh, this website's not too great. They're probably small. They might not have the ability to take on my work. So it's just interesting how perception is a huge part of marketing and branding in general. What you visually communicate and even through your written words can really have a psychological effect on what people think about the services that you perform and how much work you can take on and just overall your qualifications. So I'm not going to dive into this too much because we already kind of talked about it, but specific color palettes, font choices, these different sort of visual elements and even word choices that you're using, or voice, active voice versus passive voice, how long your sentence structure is. All of it is psychology based, so there's a lot of documents that I'm happy to share with you all afterward, a lot of resources that I use. Actually, HubSpot is a great resource for just searching for things. They've done a lot of different studies and whatnot, but certain things do communicate certain sort of messages or perception. So it's interesting how, again, a certain color can communicate a certain emotion, and I'm sure you all have heard sort of the studies about how McDonald's red and yellow makes you hungry. That's like a classic one that they talk about a lot in business school and marketing. But anyway, so I'm gonna skip past that for the most part. Messaging should be benefit driven and focus on your client and what value you bring to them. So I think specifically in this industry, and you don't see it as much now, but you saw it a lot in the past, people tend to talk about our project. We did this project was great. We did this, here's what we did, and just constantly you go on their LinkedIn, you go on their Facebook, their website, and it's all about their project portfolio and who, not even who they are, but just the projects that they've worked on. Of course, that's important. When you go to someone's website, yeah, you want to see the depth of experience. You want to know that if you're pursuing a hospitality project, you're looking for a hospitality architect, you want to know that they have that experience. But really what you're trying to communicate is what value do you bring to your client. So if they're a developer and they're looking to hire an architect for hospitality, other than just the experience, like what differentiates you from the next hospitality architect? What makes you different? What makes you unique? What's the value that you're going to give them? Because they're not.
How do you do that without focusing on what you've done?
So I'll just spin it in terms of like what I do. So I could tell you all day long, Jay Darte is great at marketing. So Jay Darte is great at marketing. Jay Darte equals great marketing on my website. But why does that matter to you? Like, how would I communicate that to you? Is that good marketing brings you more revenue. So it's just shifting the message, and it's stuff that you already know. It's just shifting it into making it less about you and more about them.
Okay, use an example of what you just said, now show me the opposite. How do you do it to focus on the customer or be benefit driven?
So that last part was, so to you it'd be like, I'm trying to think of a good example. So instead of just saying Jay Darte does great marketing, you can say increase revenue by 20% through, whatever marketing service I have to offer. I don't have like off the top of my head, I don't have like a good board.
Sell the hole, not the drill.
Exactly. Yeah. You just want to basically take whatever you're offering, what is common sense to most people, especially because if you're in the company and you're talking about these things 24/7, you know what differentiates you. So if you're, offering, I don't know, someone give me something. What?
Excellent construction services.
Excellent construction services. Instead of saying excellent construction services, what value is that going to bring to whoever you're building for? Or does that mean they're going to have more, less litigation on their end? Does that mean they're going to save costs because you're efficient? So just taking that message and sort of shifting it. Does that make sense? I don't know if I'm providing necessarily concrete examples right now, but it's.
Is there a way to become elegant on the web? So I see Apple, I see Google, Tesla, it's elegant and it flows through. Whereas inelegant, it's very wordy and it's built up and trying to put a whole bunch of stuff. How do you advise on something like that?
I think a lot of it comes down to copy. It's the less, and by copy I mean written text. The less text you have on your website, in my opinion, the better. But it has to be text that's meaningful. So if you can take your message, whatever message you're trying to say or get across, and do it in 2 to 3 sentences instead of 2 to 3 paragraphs, they're not going to read it anyway. If you put 3 paragraphs on there, I guarantee you they're not going to read it. Most of the time, it's very rare that they would read it all. So you just want to basically do the key takeaways, the bullet points of what the benefits are. And then I also think that as far as websites specifically, it comes down to the user experience. And what I mean by that is there's 2 different types of things you look at when you do a website. It's the interface and it's the actual experience. Interface is just what it looks like from a pretty standpoint, if you will. Unit interface is design. But in terms of the actual experience, is how the website flows. So a lot of things I like to do is snap to scroll, which if anyone's interested, I can show an example after. But when you're going through a website, instead of just scrolling, it basically locks in a certain area. So when you click your mouse down one time, you go to the next section, but you give more control over what the user is actually viewing. So you can get, you can create really nice looking design, I guess, and it makes it easy for the user to navigate through it because they're not having to make a bunch of choices. So a lot of it just boils down to how the website actually flows, what the architecture of the site is, and the actual wireframing of it. But then the design element also, you have to have a good graphic designer who knows what looks clean and what kind of obviously is in line with your brand. But sort of those 2 elements combined.
You mentioned bullets there. Is there any data or analytics that prove that bullet point review for the customer looking at something is far more, not appealing, but.
I meant bullets in terms of, I didn't mean actual bullet points. I meant bullets sort of what's that?
Well, okay, that's fine, okay, but if we do talk about bullets, I like reading stuff in bullets.
Mm-hmm.
I subscribe to an investment newsletter.
Yeah.
The only reason I do is because it's in bullets every day instead of paragraphs.
Yeah, there have been, in terms of I'm sure there are studies website, I couldn't speak to those right now, but in terms of actual content, it is statistically proven that bullets, but also lists, so anytime anything is in list format, performs a lot better than other content. Another interesting kind of fun fact is that no matter what industry you're in, no matter if you're dealing with people that have PhDs or you're dealing with people who have no formal education, it doesn't matter. People do not want to read long form content or long form copy that is over a 5th grade reading level. And that doesn't mean that you have to not write eloquent sentences or not write things that sound professional. But when people are commuting or they're on the train or they're in a place like a conference and they just want to read an article quickly in between breaks, they're already dealing with 800 million other things on their plate. They don't want to sit down and read something that's going to take a bunch of mental energy to actually read it. So it can still sound professional and still sound very coherent, but it should be at a baseline.
Conversational tone.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't intentionally use large jargony type words. Make it exactly like you said, conversational, where someone will actually want to read it and there are easy takeaways. Krista?
There's that, do you ever use that Hemingway app? Have you heard of that?
Is that the one where you copy and paste and it shows you highlights the portions?
Yeah.
What grade level you're actually at?
So I've used
I use
one
that
similar called Readable.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, is that the same?
Yeah.
We gotta get it like a 4th grade level, is that what we're targeting?
Fifth.
5th grade,
Fifth
right,
grade.
all right.
5th grade. Be a 5th grader. Or are you smarter than a 5th grader?
No, I'm not.
But it's really so interesting, again, it's not that you're writing content that sounds unintelligent or you're speaking to 5th graders, it's just how
In a sense, like preposition.
Exactly, or like shortening sentences, just anything to sort of make it more concise and not consistent, but concise and sort of to the point. So people, again, don't have to exert mental energy when they're reading your content. And it shouldn't be long either. I mean, I would say 5-minute reading length is probably like max. I would say anywhere from 2 to 3 minutes is the perfect length if you're writing a blog post or any type of long form copy. Because again, people don't want to sit there and read a novel. They're busy. If they're your target market, I'm sure a lot of us are trying to appeal to decision makers who are probably some of the most busy people that we're trying to appeal to. So again, if they're reading content, they don't want to spend a lot of time on it. So cool, I like that we're going around. We talked about this a little bit, so I won't spend a ton of time on it, but basically creating some sort of guideline or structure for your internal teams, whether they be marketing or not marketing, to know how to use your marketing materials and how to properly distribute that to whoever your target market is. Especially if you have, national teams where you're dealing with multiple offices, or maybe not everyone reports into the headquarter office. That's when it becomes incredibly important to have that consistency. But I think a lot of times that can be mitigated through actually having a brand guideline document, which I'm sure a lot of you have if you've ever worked with a branding firm before. But if not, it can be created in-house. Again, it doesn't have to be anything long or complex. It's just, hey, use this font, use this logo, don't use this verbiage, don't use this word instead. Just little things like that to start to create that consistency, that no matter who's using it or who's sending any sort of marketing material, which by the way can be an email. An email can be a form of marketing and communication. So it's even interesting when you're looking at your technical teams, like, again, just seeing what sort of verbiage they're using. It all ties back into marketing, but creating sort of that base guideline is helpful for sure. And creating templated collateral too. Again, that's more for actual in-house marketing departments, but just having a template where they can drop stuff into, so people aren't taking creative liberty to sort of change things on their own is helpful. And then creation of an internal approval process for anything new that goes out, I think is really important as well. I think a lot of people don't put enough emphasis on this, but having sort of 1 or 2 or maybe 5, depending on how large your firm is, but gatekeepers that can be the sort of people that are approving anything new that goes out to make sure, again, that it's consistent, because consistency in branding equals perceived consistency in services and product in your company. So not to drill it home, but I think that's incredibly important, and I feel like a lot of times there's not enough emphasis on why consistency is so important. So now we're going to talk a little bit about website. We touched on it quite a bit, so I'm going to talk about it, but let me know if you have specific questions and we'll kind of hop around. We've got about 10 minutes. I'm definitely not going to get through everything because this is 1 out of the 6. So before I go to website, is there anything you guys want to talk about that I should jump to, or questions that you had coming in where you're like, I'd love to know about this before I just keep going? Because we're definitely not going to get through it all.
What are you using to get people to your website?
So that's where SEO is a big thing.
But is there a marketing, like is it LinkedIn, is it Instagram? I mean, where are you seeing the biggest drive or what's the mouth of the funnel?
For our industry specifically, LinkedIn is huge. LinkedIn is actually a really, really big SEO driver. And for those of you that were in our LinkedIn audit session yesterday, we actually talked about how when you type in a company name or even an individual name, what's one of the first things that you see that comes up on Google search rankings? It's usually a LinkedIn page. If it's not the website, usually at least second or third is LinkedIn page if it's not Facebook or something else. Website SEO, I mean, Google is king, right?
Right.
Google owns the world. So they, of course, are the ones who, like, website does get generally a lot of SEO if you're doing what you should be doing.
Right.
But I would say if it's not coming from website, then your visibility online is coming from LinkedIn. But I can do you want me to touch on SEO? We can talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to listen to anything.
Okay, I can kind of jump to SEO and we'll talk about that. Cool. So SEO best practices, there are a lot of things that can be done that are super, super minor that your marketing team in-house or even yourself, if you have access to the back end of your website, you're the one who manages that. There are little things that you can do to help, again, with your search rankings. And one of the first things that I would recommend that I guess I put it there, but I'd like to touch on, is that you need to know what keywords you want people to be typing in order to get to your services, and vice versa. You need to look at there might be keywords that people are typing in and they're getting to your website that you had no idea. An example that I can give that's kind of funny is like 5 or 6 years ago, I had a small doormat making company, it's a 2-person thing and whatever. But I made doormats, and so I had never thought about the fact from an SEO standpoint. I thought about doormats, I thought about like custom gifts for like engagements and birthdays and that kind of thing. But when I actually looked at my Google Analytics and like my search results, what people were actually typing in, it was rugs. And I never in a million years would have thought, I don't know, just for me, I don't relate a doormat and a rug. I mean, it makes complete sense, but in my mind, that wasn't something that I actually thought about. So it's interesting when you look at your Google Analytics, which by the way, if you don't have set up, it's really simple to plug the code in. So if you don't have Google Analytics plugged into your website, that should be like a first step. Like get with your, marketing person, get with your, if you have a web developer, whatever, get with them, make sure it's plugged in. But that provides so much insight into how you can better get the right people to your website, because you don't want just anyone, right? Like you could have 1 million people viewing your website, and if they're not people that you actually want to sell to, and they're not people that will convert, it doesn't matter, because you want, again, leads and these people that you're actually trying to reach to be going to your website and to be filling out the form or, contacting you in some way or another. Of course, branding visibility is good, but again, at the end of the day, what we're trying to do is drive revenue and drive leads. So that being said, going into your Google Analytics and actually looking at, okay, maybe people are searching for what I have to offer just in a way that I haven't thought about before. It's interesting to see what keywords they use, but then you should create a list of all the keywords that you would like for you to rank on. So if you're an MEP engineer, maybe it's MEP engineer, maybe it's MEP engineering, maybe it's sustainability, like whatever services you have to offer that you want to result, be tracking those. And there are a lot of tools. There's one called SEMrush that I like a lot. Another popular one is called Moz. And again, I can send these to you after if anyone wants actual resources, but they can track and help you see how you're basically progressing or maybe not progressing when people search for those terms. So anyway, knowing what people are searching for and tracking it is the first part of that. But then once you figure out what those keywords are, actually plugging them back into your website and using them on your website is really important. So a lot of people don't realize that an H1 is basically when you go on someone's website, it's the very first thing that you see. So that it's H is header, right? So H1 is basically your primary header, H1 is your secondary header. So if you don't have your keywords, so whatever you're trying to rank for, in your primary header, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, because that is one of the #1 things that Google looks at and starts to archive when it's basically picking up whether or not, when it's going through your website, it's crawling your website and seeing what you have to offer. So it's really interesting to me when I go to websites. Some websites don't even have an H1, and it doesn't even have to be visible. There's a way where you can do it on the back end as well. But I mean, oftentimes I see websites that don't have any H1 on the front or back end, and then it's like, what do you want to rank for? It's such a simple, easy thing that you can do that, again, if you just get with your, marketing team to plug in, like, again, going back to MEP engineering just as an example, like put MEP engineering, find an eloquent way to do it, put it in that H1 header. And that's also kind of the challenge, right? Like, how do you say MEP engineering without just having MEP engineering up there? So it takes some kind of creative copywriting and making sure that you're being eloquent about how you communicate that message while simultaneously plugging those keywords back into your website. So that's important. Using the keywords is important all throughout the copy. So it's not just the H1, the primary header and the secondary header, but using it throughout too, whether it be on your home page or on your sub pages, just making sure that what you want to rank for, you're actually saying. So you don't want it to seem too repetitive, right? You don't want what we call keyword stuff. You don't want to just put keywords in as much as you can, because actually Google is incredibly intelligent and their algorithm can kind of sense when people are trying to keyword stuff too. So if you had a web page that literally just had your keyword like 100 times, Google's smart enough to know that you're just keyword stuffing. But at the same time, like, you do want to make sure you're actively using those words that you're trying to rank for. Mobile responsiveness. Most people, I believe, should be in a pretty good spot with mobile responsive websites now. If you have a website designed by any type of developer, I would say within the past, hopefully 5 years, 6 years, there's a pretty good chance it's going to be mobile responsive. But if it's not, Google did change their algorithm. It was a while ago. It was back in probably 16 or 17 now, where Google did actually change their algorithm that if your website is not mobile responsive, you will get deducted for SEO. So it's not even that you won't get points for it, positive points, but you will actually get like, you know, deducted for not having a mobile responsive website, because a lot of traffic comes from mobile now. I mean, it depends on the industry, but well over half for some industries. So it's very important. So that's all I had on SEO. We've got only a couple of minutes here. Is there anything else you guys want to touch on? I'm happy to talk to you after, or, you know, kind of, I love nerding out about marketing, so I can talk about it all day, but.
Well, I was just gonna ask if there's things that you've seen that are, sort of construction industry specific from a marketing perspective? I mean, since we're all sort of in that larger construction industry.
Sure, so construction industry is specific. Why I like this industry is because it's so relationship driven. So I think a lot of times the messaging and how, especially when it comes to digital marketing, is a little bit different and has to be a little more tactful than it would be in industries where it's B2C or where you're trying to just generate a bunch of leads through the website.
Right.
It's, you want a contact form on your website, right? Like you want to get leads that way, but it's not like, for example, when I was at OxBlue, it's on the product side, so it's not as transactional. Or, I'm sorry, OxBlue was more transactional than, say, where a lot of us lie on the services side, not all of us, but a lot of us lie on the services side, where it's more, again, relationship driven. So just changing that message, I think it becomes a more humanized approach and a less sort of, and again, relationship, it's more about building trust than it is necessarily like the engineering or the architecture of product at the end of the day. Like it is in terms of people want to know your experiences there, but people want to know what's the human element behind it and how do you sort of make that connection to an individual. Even though you're still marketing, it's still one to many, it's still communicating that sort of value proposition from a trust element, trust standpoint, if you will. Then in terms of website and content projects, like projects that are being worked on, is not something you see a ton in other industries. Like there might be case studies or examples of where your product was successful, but it's not in terms of actual projects where you have a team, like a development team and a GC team and engineering. And I think there's a lot of leverage that can be had there too. If you have a project team, you can cross market between all those different players, and it makes sense. Marketing departments want that. It's multiple people creating content and sharing content and marketing sort of that project at that point rather than the individual firms. It kind of serves a dual purpose. But I think that's what's really interesting about this industry specifically too. But the relationship element and making sure you're not overly, what's the word? You're communicating at a correct and proper cadence, I think is just different than it would be in other industries that are more transactional. Kevin?
So I have this spirited debate with our marketing team based on that question and your response. Is because we are so relationship driven and our work comes through those relationships. Mm-hmm. Why would I spend the money to get my SEO higher? Because I'm not really looking to generate work through that, right?
Sure, and that's where I would say I wouldn't spend a lot of money on SEO. I would say it's important, right? Like when people search for your company, or not even your company, because if you search for your company will come up. But if they search for your services just from a pure credibility standpoint, it speaks a lot that if someone types in whatever service or product you have to offer and you rank, it shows that you're like credible in your space, because obviously a lot of other people are going to your website as well. People don't know that, but you're ranked and they assume that, oh, because they're #1 on Google, they must be the best. That's the perception, where a lot of times it's not true. It's just they have better SEO than the next guy. But a lot of this stuff we just talked about, again, you don't need an SEO expert. You don't need to spend 15 grand a month, you know, which I've seen companies do. For you, it doesn't make sense to do that because you don't need that. That's not the intention. Where I would say to spend more effort and time and money and resources for you would maybe be on like branding, for example. Like taking a look at branding and making sure that it communicates what you want it to communicate. Being website design, which, you know, oftentimes can be heftier. Maybe take a look at LinkedIn and see a lot of your clientele is probably on LinkedIn, people that you're dealing with, and that's something that you see all the time and that your employees are using and interacting with. So spend the resources in different areas would be my suggestion.
You can lay all that out when you come to see us.
There you go, perfect. Give you the lowdown, yeah. But yeah, so I would argue that for a lot of people in this space, spending a lot of money on SEO probably doesn't make sense, but there are still simple things that can be done. Again, this is just sort of, things that you can literally go and we can do in, you know, a couple hours, like 2 hours today. It's simple stuff that should be done in our best practices, but you don't have to spend any extra money on if you have an internal team or want to do it yourself. Yeah.
I think, Jackie, as you mentioned, since things are so much on the relationship side of things, I think from our perspective, that helps us simplify our marketing. Because if we've done our job, then you're not necessarily trying to communicate everything in your marketing collateral. It's a mechanism, and you need to, like you said, be able to convey things, but you don't need to spell out every detail.
Sure.
Or you don't need to have a different piece of collateral for every person you're speaking with.
Yeah, you're right, and then you can get more targeted and look at areas where you would want to expand. So if there's a new target market you're trying to reach, I think a lot of times in this industry, like you said, because it is relationship driven, a lot of it's referral driven too. I mean, a lot of it's referral driven, but there are going to be those instances where people don't know who you are, or maybe they know who you are, but they still want additional information. So I think it all depends. It goes back to what your goal is and what you're trying to expand. Again, if you're a firm and you have a service that you haven't put, that you realize that service is profitable, but we haven't put a lot of emphasis on it because people know us as XYZ, it probably makes sense to focus on that service. So it goes back to the sales team and the BD team. It's more granular. You guys, I mean, obviously you're trying to sell and generate revenue, but it's usually more granular than that. You usually have like, okay, we want to grow this vertical, or we want to grow these number of clients. So it's getting with the marketing team and saying, how can we strategically help you meet that goal, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Can you start over?
All right, so my name is Jackie Angela. No, I'm just kidding. I did record it though, just as an FYI. So if anyone does want the recording, first of all, let me know if anyone has a problem with that, I'll delete it. But if you do want the recording, happy to share it. Happy to share my slides. Happy to talk to you guys after. Again, I love marketing. It's my passion, so I'm happy to.
How do we get started working?
I have, thank you, John. I have cards. I have these lovely Post-its. You can just email me or talk to me after. My cell's on there, my email, but I'm more than happy to just have a conversation. We can talk about needs, but basically we'll get together and just kind of talk about what you need and what makes sense and time frame and everything. And obviously that looks different for each person, but yeah, come see me after. Yeah, because I actually did not put my email on my slides, so I apologize, but I do have cards, and I think a lot of you I'm connected with on LinkedIn and whatnot, and I'll be around tonight too.